Hello and welcome to this Curious About live session brought to you by Glasgow Science Centre in partnership with Science Skills Academy, Dundee Science Centre and Aberdeen Science Centre. I'm Patrick, and our guest for this session is Ieuan Collins, who is an innovation engineer at Wave Energy Scotland. Today, we're going to hear from Ieuan about his path to a job in renewable energy and a bit about what happens behind the scenes of Wave Energy. As you're watching the session, you might have your own questions, so please do feel free to type them into the chat box on YouTube, and we will try and get through as many as we possibly can. Hello, Ieuan. Nice to meet you, and thank you so much for joining us for this session.
Hi, Patrick. Hello, everybody. Nice to meet you all.
It's great to have you here. I think we'll just get started with the first question straight away, which is, yes, stripping it back to basics. What is renewable energy, and why is it important?
So, renewable energy is essentially renewable in its nature. So, making sure you're harvesting energy from renewable resources, something which can be replaced or last forever. So, when you think of the wind, waves, sun, that's something going on forever, and you don't have to replace it. Like with oil and gas, for example, there's a limited amount of that, and once you run out, you run out, and there's no energy left to harvest. Whereas renewable energy, it's effectively lasts forever. So very important as well because it doesn't produce any emissions or a small amount of emissions relative to oil and gas and other non-renewable resources. So a lot of the sort of tasks or goals of the last sort of 20, 30 years is trying to get people to move towards renewable energy, and governments have sort of been incentivizing sort of companies and stuff to look into this technology and bring it, to the masses. And it's happening here in the UK.
And it's very much happening in Scotland. And I suppose, for a windy, rainy, sometimes stormy country, does that mean that we are a good place for renewable energy?
Exactly. So, if you find a country which is more further north, it's sort of it's battered by the elements, like Scotland's rainy, windy, you name it. So, but for energy, that's a lot of energy exerted on the country, and you can harvest that energy and turn it into useful electricity.
So
So,
the next
wave energy,
carry on.
so wave energy is, very much along the west coast of Scotland, and it's got very strong winds. I don't know if some of you have been to the west coast of Scotland, or been out at the sea swimming, you can really feel the power of those waves. And if you put a device up there, there's a lot of energy that can be harvested.
So I suppose it's a good time to ask you to tell us a little bit more about wave energy itself. Is it pretty much self-explanatory? It's energy generated from waves. Since Xavier's primary asking essentially the same question, how do you use waves to make energy?
I think I've got a couple of images. If you put them up on the screen, that'd be really helpful. Makes life a bit easier to explain. But yeah, this is an example now of a device. So I think start off with what is a wave, and a wave is essentially wind acting on a large body of water, and that's causing the top surface to have these orbital motions. So the water's going round and round in circles like this, and it causes these waves then to propagate up and down. And then this wave effectively, if in this device case, there's a change in pressure on the sea surface. So you can imagine that pressure changing. And if you have the seabeds, you can harvest that change in pressure. So if you have two moving bodies, one fixed in this case, and the other one free to move, and then something like a generator between those two, you can harvest electricity. And if you flip through a few other designs, I think I've got, there's different ways in which you can do it, like different geometries, but fundamentally they're all doing the same thing, and that's two bodies reacting against one another. So in this case, it's a mass, basically like on a spring, and it's going up and down, up and down, up and down, floating on the surface, reacting against the seabeds. And then I think the last one I have, here is basically two flaps, which are at a hinge, and they're reacting against one another, and that's floating on the surface. And that'd be like tethered to the seabed with some clever rope system.
So, how much power can we generate from wave energy? Is this generating the same amount of energy as something like a wind turbine, or how much are we powering using this?
So it could develop the same amount of energy as a wind turbine. Like I think the current state of that wind turbine is about 15 megawatts. But our wave devices right now are much smaller because when you want to start off a technology, you start off small before you scale up to bigger devices. So we're sort of looking more at kilowatt ratings now. So that's like, I don't know, zero point 0.3 megawatts versus 15 megawatts. So it's a bit smaller, but that's where wind energy started, 30, 40 years ago. It was at that scale as well. So it scales up over time once you get more confidence in the technology. And that way, then you can, effectively build it larger. And it gets cheaper when you scale up as well. So as you make things bigger and you increase the production of something, it normally gets cheaper and more attractive. And that's why wind energy is really a good solution for the UK grid right now.
And forgive me, I can't remember if you've mentioned this already, but did you say that is that something that's happening right now already on the west coast of Scotland? Do we have these in the water?
So we've been, as part of my job in Wave Energy Scotland, I'm not directly involved in this, but some of my colleagues have been sort of funding a program which looks at new wave energy converter technologies. And as part of that, like the last stages were to test the device off, the west coast of Scotland, and just get that sort of maturity knowledge from large scale testing. That's where you learn the most, is when you build the device, you put it out in the water, because you can plan everything, calculation stage, drawing and sketching the design, but you only really find out when you actually test it. So that's the important stage, and that's where you learn, the flaws of the design. You can go back and you can fix them and then take it out again. And that's like sort of an iteration of the design as time goes on.
It's exciting times. We've got another question for you, Ieuan, which is, we touched on this a little bit, but maybe we can go into slightly more detail. What does a day in your job look like?
So I think, well, right now I'm in a hotel room in Aviemore. So I'm just going to attend a conference here. So this is Ocean Energy Europe. So this is where people from the EU who are sort of funding wave energy, so it's sort of large European conference. So lots of delegates from around Europe going here. And it'd just be a great opportunity to exchange ideas, collaborate with different people. So a lot of my job is, attending conferences, collaborating with different people. But the main point of my job is to sort of work out how to fund both universities and companies to take wave energy to more mature stages of development. So sort of project managing lots of little projects and making people have conversations. So trying to just tie all those people together and get the nice end product, which is wave energy.
So is wave energy happening in other countries as well, or is it just Scotland at the moment?
It's happening in other countries. As I said, this is a European conference, so there's other people in Europe looking at wave energy. It's also being looked at in the United States. So there's lots of countries looking into wave energy. Normally, the countries looking into wave energy are the ones with a coastline and a west-facing coastline. So because that's where the most of the wave energy is. So if you want me to delve in a bit more of that, so wave energy typically is at its strongest with where the wind acts over the largest body of water. So if you have a huge ocean between you, the coastline, and the next coastline, and a load of wind happening in that distance, and because of the prevailing wind is always westwards, west facing, you will have this sort of large amount of energy on the west coast. So that's the sort of places where you need to be doing it.
I did not know that. I just assumed, well, maybe it's because I live in Scotland and it feels like the wind's coming from every single direction at the same time. But so the wind is always best on the west coast of every country in the world. Doesn't matter where you are.
That's where the waves are the greatest, not necessarily the winds being the highest, but normally that's the waves the greatest because it's the largest body of water where the wind's been acting upon. If you think of an east coast place, the wind's not facing that direction. So obviously the wind changes direction all the time, but the prevailing wind over the course of an ocean, that's what develops the waves, and that's where they're the largest on the west coast.
I did not know that. West is best. There you go. We've got a school question for you next, which is from Mr. Bogue. Thank you, Mr. Bogue. What is the best part of being an innovations engineer? What do you like the best about your job, Ian?
I enjoy just getting into the details, just reading about cutting edge technologies. So when I attend like these, I attend sort of regular sort of weekly meetings where we sort of discuss, the latest work happening in universities and with companies, and they give like a presentation, and we sort of ask questions, and then we find out so much more about it. And in that sort of interaction, you get to learn about some of the really cool, innovative things happening in the universities right now, sort of cutting edge technologies. And I just love just questioning people on that, find out more, and also like have the ability to go to these conferences, learn about the new ideas in the field, talk to different people. That's really enjoyable. It gets you to some interesting places as well.
Sounds great. We've got another school question for you coming up now, Ian. A reminder to everyone watching, you can send in your own questions about Ian's job or about wave energy. Just type them into the chat box. This is from Emma. Thank you. How far out to sea do you put the device? Good question.
That's a really good question. Yeah, so that can vary. Like you saw all those different geometries, but you can have devices which are like really close to the shore, sort of seabed mounted, not much water above them, sort of easier access. But the biggest wave energy is further out, in the deeper water. So you ideally want to be putting devices much further out to sea, potentially a kilometre or more out at sea. But there's a challenge with water depth when you go more and more out. Obviously, you have to tether that device to the seabeds, and those lines get more and more complicated. So right now we're sort of, several kilometres sort of out to sea. But some of the early devices are much easier to do closer to the shore, easier access, and less forces acting on your device. So it's a good way to sort of benchmark it before going all the way further out to sea.
Yeah, I guess it makes sense that the further out you have to go, the harder and harder it gets to get them working properly in the first place. We have another live question for you, yeah, which is from Miss Lynch. Thank you very much. From St Marnix Primary. Hello, St Marnix. How many houses could wave energy power?
That's a really good question, but quite difficult to answer, because it does just depend how much wave energy you have. But I'll put into context the national energy grid. So if we were to use all the wave energy like in the UK, the whole UK energy consumption, like 10%, 10 to even 15% of it could be powered by wave energy. So in terms of homes, that's like, a big percentage of the UK could be powered by it. But if you're looking more at local deployments, for example, a good place to benchmark wave energy might be some coastal islands where they're a bit more off grids, and you have a few devices out at sea there, where you're talking sort of megawatt scale. Then that could power that local community. So I hope that answers the question, but it's quite hard when to explain. It just depends how much of it you've got deployed, but it's the potential is huge. You could power 10% of the UK energy requirements.
No, that's a lot. That makes sense to me, and that's a really high and significant number. So it makes what you're doing incredibly important. Imagine having an island powered just by the waves that were crashing off it. That would be quite something. Hope that answers your question, St Marnix. Let us know if it doesn't. Feel free to come back and ask another one. Speaking of having another question, I think we have another live question coming up, which is from St Joseph's. Thank you very much. How long does it take to set up the devices offshore? So I think you mentioned one that was maybe 7 kilometers. Yes, let's use that one as the example. So how long would that take to set up?
Yeah, you've got a few stages in deployment. You have to, pull it out. You have to build it first. So normally you build it like in a dock near shore, and then you would sort of, depending on the device, you can sort of tug that out to shore then on a tugboat. So that takes, a matter of days, but the
Mhm.
building bit takes, months. So um, going from zero to, taking out to shore, that can take many months, but um, the main, I guess, time is spent in developing and designing, because we're still at that stage of wave energy. A lot of it is going through cycles of developing and designing. There's not that many deployed. Well, there have been quite a few deployed in Scotland, but not many been deployed in recent years. So we're going through like a cycle of, you know, developing, and the ones we have deployed, yeah, it takes sort of several weeks to months. What I will say is one device has been out at sea for over like a year, and that sort of demonstrated like how resilient the technology can be to really rough seas. So it's showing a lot of promise in terms of being a sort of commercial, sort of attractive solution.
And like you said, sometimes, the more popular this becomes, the quicker the process will be, because it's still quite a new idea. It might take a little bit longer just now, but hopefully in a few years, it's the kind of thing that would speed up quite a lot.
It's,
Would that be
I
fair to
think,
say?
yeah. If you got the sort of the infrastructure built up, and just understanding of yeah, what is required for a wave energy device in terms of a dock, all the other things can be sort of tailored to it, and then there's a sort of standardization then, which makes the whole process a lot easier. Like with wind currently, so wind's a good example of the sort of pathway where we hope wave energy will follow. They say so wave energy is like 20, 25 years behind wind energy. So you have to sort of look back at what wind energy was like 25 years ago, and then you have an understanding of that sort of pathway to success.
No, that makes sense. Thank you very much, St. Joseph's, for the question. A reminder that if you have any more questions for Ieuan, get them sent in as quick as you can, and we'll try and get through them. I think on that, we do have had one that's just come through, which is from Dykesmains Primary. Oh, it's a big question, Ieuan. It's how are tides created?
So yeah, this is like a lot of confusion with wave energy actually, because people confuse tidal and wave energy and think they're the same thing, but they're quite a bit different. So waves are caused by winds acting on the ocean surface, where tides is actually caused by the moon, and the moon has a gravitational pull on all the water around the Earth, and that causes the current to flow in various directions. So depending on where the moon is, that's pulling water at various points in the Earth. Um, so quite a bit different. And for a tidal device, you don't have a bobbing motion. You have just a flow of water like a river current. So that's where the best way to harvest tidal energy is through a turbine, because it's sort of similar to wind energy except it's water. So you've got water moving from A to B, whereas wave energy, the water isn't really moving. It's doing an orbital rotation like that. It's just caused by wind on the surface.
I mean, you blew my mind at the start of that answer when you said that tides are generated by the moon. I'm still trying to get my head around that. So while I recover, I think we've got another live question coming up, which is from Dal BT Primary School. Thank you so much for getting in touch. How long has wave technology been around, and how long does it take to make the technology to use wave energy?
So wave energy has been around since the 1970s. So it's been around a fair time. So in the 1970s, there was like this big shift in like how we sort of saw how energy could be made, because oil prices went up huge by a huge amount in that time. So governments were looking at alternative ways to power their country with energy, and that's where renewable energy sort of the start of its sort of kicked off, and wind, wave, solar were all sort of at that sort of beginning stage. And wind and solar now are like really advanced, supplying huge amounts of energy, big percentages contribution to each country's energy usage. Whereas wave has sort of lagged behind, and the main reason for that is simply because it's a harder problem to solve. Whereas wind, you've got forces which are still high, but waves, if you've been out of water, you think how much force has been imparted on you when you go out at sea. It's a lot of force. And the challenge is with a wave device, you've got like a calm day where there's very sort of calm waves, and then there's other times then you have a storm and the waves are like so much stronger and greater, and you have to keep that design out there. You can't just like turn it off and put it away. It's sort of stuck out there, so you have to make it harvest the energy, and at the same time you have to make it survive those storms. And to harvest that energy you have to make it move a lot. So in those storms, you have to find a way of stopping it to move so much. So that's the real crux of the problem, you know. So the second half of the question: how long does it take to make technology use wave energy? Yeah, it can take many years. Like the programs which we had were like over like 4 to 5 years, where you sort of start with a concept, you go through your initial calculation. So a lot of it is on the computers to begin with, just doing simulations, building models, and then you take that to a small lab scale, and you build like a a device which is that size first, just to understand the concept, and you make it much bigger again. And then you get to the point then maybe 5, 6 years down the line where you can say, okay, we can build this device. So it can take half a decade to develop a technology just from its infancy, like from the idea.
That was a great question, Dalbeatty. Thank you. And still a little bit of time left to get your questions in, so pester your teachers and make sure that those questions are still coming through. We've got another question from the school. This is from St Saviour's Primary. How did you discover that wave energy was a thing? Now, it wasn't you yourself that discovered it, was it, Ieuan?
No, definitely wasn't me. No. Yeah, wave. Actually, as a fun fact, like wave energy, like the first ever patent issued, I think, was back in 1770 something. It was like 1779, something like that. It was a long time ago. So the idea of wave energy is not a new idea. It goes back, centuries. But for me personally, I discovered it. So during my undergraduate degree, I did a degree at university, and it was in South Wales. South Wales has pretty good waves. So if you like your surfing and stuff, it's really good down that way. And yeah, a lot of the research happening at Swansea University at that time was sort of tidal energy, and there's a project coming up, but it was in wave energy, so it was a bit different. And I happened to know the sort of person who was running it, and I applied for it, and that's how I got on to wave energy. I did a sort of PhD in it, and before that, I was like most people, I wasn't 100% sure what the difference between tidal and wave energy was. But now, obviously, doing it for the best part of the last 6 years, I have a much better understanding of it. Yeah, I discovered it just through university, but there's been sort of BBC television programs where they talked about it as well. So yeah, and there's a lot of stuff if you want to know about wave energy on YouTube. There's really interesting sort of videos explaining it as well if you want to find out more information.
Fantastic. So it's been around. The idea of it's been around since the 1700s ish. And
yeah. But it wasn't really actively investigated until the 1970s, and it's had its sort of more investigations and less investigation periods. But recently it's much greater, because there's much more of an emphasis due to trying to reach net zero, and we need all the renewables possible in the grid to get to that point. We can't have a grid which is highly dependent on one renewable. So it makes it very risky because energy fluctuates a lot, especially from a wind turbine. It's a very sort of spiky up and down power output, whereas wave energy is quite a bit smoother. So having that more resilience in the grid is really important. That's why it's good to have a good mix of renewable energy.
Fab. Well, hopefully that answers your question, St Saviour's. Thank you very much. Ieuan, you're getting inundated with live questions just now. We've got another one coming up, which is from Fair Isle Primary School. And it says, where do you see wave energy going in the future?
So, really good question. And I see it going hopefully in a good positive direction. We've proven it over the past few years of technologies which are out at sea for over a year in some of the worst sea conditions imaginable. It's off the west coast of Scotland, the stormy seas, and if you can make designs work out there, you can make them work anywhere. So I'm pretty optimistic that wave energy is going to go to a point where it's providing utility, national grid scale electricity. So I think we just need to sort of start with the scaling up, and just get a few more designs to that point where we've got a bit more variety of developers who are doing it. But I'm quite optimistic. And so some of the long term stuff then, like personally for me, I'm looking at flexible materials. So a lot of the designs currently are made out of like rigid structures like steel, sort of hard materials. But there's potential, flexible materials like rubbers, which stretch, which could be like a new way of harvesting energy. So some of the projects I'm working on as part of my job is looking at those new technologies and how they might break through, and they could have even more potential to address the wave energy problem.
And what excites you the most about the future? Yeah, and what makes you get out of bed every day and want to work in this field? What really excites you about it?
I think like in this job, like you, it always surprises you, like with like some of the ideas which come from people, like oh, that's a new way of doing something, or and you are working with some really cutting edge things, like for me, working with these flexible materials where you can harvest energy through a material change in its stretch. So you can imagine that's such high tech stuff where you can build these smart materials which harvest energy like that. And that's what excites me, because I've always had a sort of research focused mind, and that's why I did a PhD. And to do a job where I'm still looking at all the latest and greatest technologies and some of the latest research from really good researchers from universities, that's amazing. So yeah, I wake up in bed really excited to start each day for this job. It's great.
Unfortunately, we've only got time for one more question, Ieuan, which is from Kings Oak Primary. Thank you very much. What could we do? So I think everyone watching, what could everybody watching do to get involved in wave energy in the future?
Well, it's good to learn about wave energy, and I think like your generation, there's going to be so many opportunities coming up in the field of wave energy. We're hoping to get this utility scale wave energy deployment out there in the future. And with that will come loads of jobs, from technical roles to less technical roles, and getting involved in wave energy. That we do sort of STEM outreach events and stuff like that. And yeah, if you want to present something, school presentation, just getting the wave energy message out there is really important. And yeah, just reading about it, get reading into the details.
Fab. Well, Ieuan, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a real privilege to talk to you, and thanks for giving up your time to speak to everybody watching.
All right, thank you all for listening.
That is all we've got time for today. I'd like to say a big thank you from myself, Glasgow Science Centre, Dundee Science Centre, Aberdeen Science Centre, and Science Skills Academy to Ieuan. Thanks for joining us today and for sharing your knowledge. It's been great. If you'd like to find out more about engineering or wave energy, you can find out more on the Curious About website. That's curiousabout.glasgowsciencecentre.org. And you can also find loads more videos, activities, and games there as well. And if you missed the start of this session, or you want to watch it again, then these are all recorded and will be available in the live sessions section of our website. Please let us know what you thought of this live session. A little survey is popping up in the chat box just now. But until next time, thank you and goodbye.